What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in this video I'm going to be going through my Week 17 top 18 quarterback rankings, also splitting these QBs up into different tiers. Posted the running backs and wide receivers yesterday. Tight ends and defenses will be out today also. And if you guys have any fantasy questions, just drop them down below. Also, if we get some new injury news later on in the week, prior to the games, if you just leave a new comment, I'll continue to monitor and try to get back to you guys as quick as I can. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit that like button, but let's just dive right into it. Starting off in tier 1, I have two quarterbacks in this tier. It's going to be Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen. So far this season, these guys have been the clear top two on a point per game basis. And then just looking at the difference between these two this week, Jalen Hurts just has the much more favorable matchup here going up against the Cardinals. So those are my two tier 1 options. Shifting into tier 2, going to have three QBs here. It's going to be Dak Prescott, Lamar Jackson, and Brock Purdy. Now, I did have a pretty tough time differentiating between Dak Prescott and Lamar Jackson. I think the edge I gave to Dak just comes down to the matchup. Would much rather be going up against this Lions defense and the Lions pass defense compared to the Dolphins. So I gave Prescott the slight edge, but I like both these guys in this tier. And then Brock Purdy, even though he's coming off just a complete disaster in Week 16, I have a lot of confidence that he's going to bounce back here. He's been a super strong fantasy option, pretty much all season long prior to Week 16. And this is just the perfect bounce back spot going up against this Commanders defense. This offense is still healthy, at least in terms of his skill position weapons. So I'd be totally fine just going right back to Brock Purdy in my starting lineup. Now looking at tier 3, going to start off this tier with Justin Fields. Good news is that it looks like DJ Moore is not on the injury report, so he should be, close to 100% heading into Week 17. Cole Kmet, his status is kind of up in the air at this point. We don't know if he's going to play. Without Cole Kmet, I do think it could be a little bit of a hit to Justin Fields. Not a great matchup, not a terrible matchup here against the Falcons. I feel like this is just where kind of Fields has settled in at this point as like a mid-tier QB1 option. After Fields, I have Matthew Stafford. Decent matchup here against the Giants. Stafford's really just been rolling over the last 4 weeks. I feel like this is a spot where we just want to ride the hot hand. He's getting Kupp, Puka, Demarcus Robinson involved. You have Kyron Williams in that offense. The Rams just look very good over the second half of the season, most notably the last few weeks. So I think Stafford's a nice option here as my QB7. Then I have CJ Stroud, and I would expect Stroud to return here in Week 17 after missing both Week 15 and Week 16. He has a decent matchup here against the Titans, and even though he's lost Tank Dell, you still have Nico Collins, you have Noah Brown, you have Dalton Schultz. So I think Stroud is going to step back in and be a solid QB1 option. If he's playing, I do view him as a top 10 guy. And then the final quarterback in tier 3 is going to be Kyler Murray. I think people see this Eagles matchup and they think it might be kind of tough. It's actually kind of the opposite. Over the entire season, this has been one of the best matchups for opposing fantasy quarterbacks to go up against. So I like Kyler in this spot. His weapons are definitely lacking at this point with Marquise Brown injured. Just not a ton going on at the wide receiver position, but he has that rushing upside with his legs. And so I think he's an interesting option here to close out tier 3. Now shifting into tier 4, prior to the 2023 season, I definitely didn't think I'd be talking about Patrick Mahomes as a tier 4 option in my weekly rankings, but I feel like this is where we're at this point. He just hasn't given you much of a ceiling over the past 4 games. This Chiefs offense hasn't looked great. I will say it's a somewhat plus matchup here against the Bengals, but it's not a smash spot where, I'm willing to just forget what we've seen over the past few weeks. So I think he's definitely still playable as a top 10 quarterback option, but he's definitely not someone I'm super excited to just throw into my lineup, which is probably what you would have been hoping for heading into the season, that he'd just be an auto start. Definitely not at this point, but he's going to lead tier 4 for me. After Mahomes, I'm going to go with Jordan Love. Still some uncertainty here with his weapons. We had Jaden Reed logging limited participation. Romeo Doubs is healthy. Wicks and Watson did not participate in practice on Wednesday. So we'll see if those guys can, get on the practice field before the Week 17 game. As long as he has 2 or 3 of those wide receivers, I feel fine. He's really been pretty solid as a fantasy option over the second half of the season, and it's not a great matchup here against the Vikings, but I think Jordan Love's a fine back-end QB1 play. And then the last guy in this tier is going to be Baker Mayfield. Definitely someone who's peaking at the right time. Could have been someone that you went out, grabbed off of waivers, and has just kind of been a nice staple in your lineup over the last few weeks. Not a terrible matchup here against the Saints, so I like Baker to wrap up tier 4. And then shifting into tier 5, going to be my final tier here. Going to start it off with Jared Goff. Not a great matchup here against the Cowboys, which is why he, wouldn't be bumped to tier 4, which is where he could have been, in a more positive matchup. But I think it's fine. Then we have Geno Smith going up against the Steelers. Definitely a little bit more favorable there. Geno overall has been somewhat disappointing fantasy-wise, but he has the weapons. I think he's a nice high-end QB2 play. Then I have Joe Flacco, and it was kind of tough for me to rank Flacco along with a lot of the other Browns kind of skill position guys this week, because since Flacco has taken over, he has been very impressive, both from a real-life NFL perspective and from a fantasy perspective. Also very successful at supporting the weapons, Amari Cooper, David Njoku, guys like that. Unfortunately, he just runs into a really, really tough matchup here against this Jets defense. So we kind of have to balance how he's looked since becoming the starter along with this matchup. So that's why I have him here in tier 5. If you're just going to tell me, like, he's playing super well, I'm going to ride the hot hand and play him, I get it. Like, I could see an argument for him being higher. This is where he's going to settle in for me. But like I said, it was a pretty tough call. After Flacco, going to go with Tua. Another guy drawing a tough matchup here against the Ravens, and it looks like he probably won't have Jalen Waddle. If you're telling me Tua is losing one of his top 2 weapons and has a tough matchup and is going on the road to Baltimore, I don't feel great about him as a starting fantasy option. Then I have Trevor Lawrence. It seems like his injury is kind of uncertain at this point in terms of whether or not he's going to be good to go for week 17. They're kind of taking like the rest approach instead of seeing, how he can manage it earlier on in the week in practice. So I could see him being like a game time decision. That's not ideal, and it's also just not a great matchup here against the Panthers. So he kind of takes a hit from where he would have been if he was healthy. And then the final guy in these rankings is going to be Derek Carr, coming off of back-to-back strong games. Solid matchup here against the Buccaneers. Derek Carr is the dude who ended up sliding in when we got the Russell Wilson news. Maybe he's someone you pivot to if you planned on firing up Russ. But that's going to wrap it up for my top 18 quarterback rankings. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, check out the tight ends and defenses coming out today also. But thank you all for stopping by. Good luck with your championships this week. Bring home the dub. But thank you again, and I will see you in the next one.